Hey everyone, my name is Carson Witt and I'm going to do a tutorial today showing you all how to use the CNC Shark and also use the software that's associated with it. So first things first, this is how your end product is going to look. You're going to have some kind of image element that you outlined, you make toolpaths for. It's going to cut it out, it's going to make depth cuts. So here you can see these parts shallower than the other parts. It's going to do outlines of the text, and you're going to have a pretty nice looking emblem or plaque or really anything you want. And then it's going to do an outline cut, and you're just going to have a piece of wood that is completely done by the machine. So let's go into it. So first things first, you're going to have to find an image you want to make you want to make into your wood essentially. So I just decided to go with the old school V8 Ford logo. It's a cool logo. It's kind of complex. It has like lots of hard curves and corners. So it'll be a challenging piece for the machine to do, but it can perform really well doing anything. So first things first, this is just about using images, SVG graphics, PNG, so PNG, JPEG, SVGs. You can use any of them. SVG, the resolution doesn't matter, so don't focus on that. But for PNGs and JPEGs, you need to make sure you get the image with the highest resolution. So I looked around these for a while already. This one's 800 by 800. This image is 300 by 223. This one's 500 by 500, 600 by 600. As you can see, they're all a lot smaller than this one, which was 1017 by 1024. So I'm going to use this image. To save it, you just hit Save Image As. It's going to automatically save it to your Downloads folder. Mine gives me I have a setting that gives me the option to save it wherever I want. But for you, it's just going to save it right to your Downloads folder. And it's going to pop up down here, whatever name it saved it as. And that's the end of the first part. Now onto the second part, you're going to open VCarve up. Version doesn't matter a whole lot for these because this is included in almost every version of VCarve. I'm using the 10.512 trial edition because that's the only one I have available, but you're going to have a lower version in the actual machine shop. So I'm going to go create a new file. And the first thing it's going to give you is setting up your material sizes. So you can put in the size of the material you're actually going to clamp down to the bed, which is the best thing to do. Or you can kind of make a virtual material in your head and make the size to that. So I'm going to do the first option, which is let's pretend that I have a 5 by 5 inch 3/8 thick sheet of wood. So it's already in here, 5 by 5, 0.375 inches, which is 3/8. That's the thickness. And then all these other settings you don't have to worry about a whole lot. Let me address the first thing real quick. Job type. You're going to be sticking with single-sided. Double-sided and rotary are a little more complicated, and they VCarve and CNC Shark has videos on those. You could look into those, but this is just going to be for kind of beginner tutorial using single-sided pieces. So job size 5 by 5 inches, 3/8 thick. Z0 position is always going to be material surface. You're going to zero the bit to the material surface, not to the bed, the machine bed that is. XY date position is what corner of the material you're going to zero it to. So in my case, I'm going to do the bottom left corner, as I would suggest you do as well. And then you don't have to worry about these bottom two settings. Hit OK. And now it actually generates a piece of material. This is a 5 by 5 inch piece of material. You can see by the lines up above. 0, 2, 4, 5 is right here, and it kind of lines up at that corner. Same thing for down here, 0, 2, 4, 5 right here. Perfect. The next thing is actually just importing our image. So you're going to click this button right up here. It says Import Bitmap. An image is a bitmap, so if that was confusing, just know it's a bitmap. So I'm going to import this. This is the file I downloaded. I'm going to make it as big as I can. This is why it's important to have high resolution image, because when you're using images like JPEG or PNG, the resolution actually dictates how fine your image looks. With SVGs, you can scale them as much as you want, and they're always going to look the same detail-wise because they're not actually using pixels. They're using, it's called vector graphics, so it uses lines that can stretch and shrink and not actually change the fineness of the line. But in this case, if I zoom in really low in this image, you can see the blur on the edges and where each of these pixels is actually a little different. So the next step, now that we have our image and you stretch it out to the size you want. Keep in mind, I stretched it like this and put it in the middle because on the actual machine itself, the way you're going to hold the material down to the bed is with clamps, and the clamps go on each corner of the piece. You can usually get away with them on 3 corners, but I would suggest doing 4 for the most part. So right here, there's room in the top left corner, top right, bottom right, and lower left. So that will give me room to put clamps on and not interfere with the bit actually running into these pieces. And then I'm going to go to, first I need to select my image. It's already selected. Go to create vectors, and we're going to trace bitmap. And this is where the magic happens. This tool essentially lets you trace images. It does edge detection for you, and it does it really well. So you want to convert your image to black and white, and this is how you control how finely it detects a line. So if you want to detect every single little thing in the picture as a line, it'll do that, and it'll take little things that you can't even see as humans, but it knows in the computer is there, and it'll think those are lines. So if I hit preview here, you'll see that it made a bunch of lines out of random stuff that we don't actually want. So you do need to adjust this threshold to a kind of safe zone. You know, if I do the bottom end of the scale, you're gonna get nothing, because now it's saying barely detect anything, so nothing is essentially what it does there. But slowly keep moving up and up, it's going to detect more and more, and now we're at a full image. You need to go around, sorry, we're at a full trace. So now you need to go around and check all these edges, make sure there's no gaps in them, because sometimes it'll actually leave little gaps and you won't notice them unless you look closely. So I don't see any gaps right now. Nope, looks good to me. Noise filter and bitmap fading you can leave as defaults, but for a corner fit, I would suggest rounding out all these corners. So you say loose, and that'll round out lots of corners for you. This makes it just easier for the bits to cut in certain areas. So I'm gonna leave it like that. Preview, and it looks great. So I'm gonna hit apply, close, and now this black outline of this entire image is our trace, which is also just called a vector. So this is a vector now, and we can actually use these vectors to make toolpaths. So you're gonna go to the Toolpaths tab at the top right. I just realized my window's a little offset. There we go. Go to your Toolpaths tab at the top right. Make sure you have the vector selected, so it's gonna be pink. And you're gonna go to VCarve Engraving Toolpath, because this is an engraving tutorial. We're gonna focus on that. Bit, I would always suggest just sticking to the 60-degree 1/4 inch bit. That's the main one we use in the shop, and I would advise you to stick to that one. Then actually I think the bit is a 1/2 inch, not 1/4 inch. You may have to adjust that depending on what we use in the shop. But for the depth of the engraving, you can choose that to be whatever you want. I'm just going with 0.25 inches, which is a 1/4 inch. And start depth always wants to be at 0, because you want to start on the surface of the material. You don't want to start engraving like, you know, midway into the material, else it's just going to dive the bit into the material. Always keep in mind that the machine will do whatever it's told. So if you tell it to start, you know, if you tell it to start at a negative point, it'll go straight through the material and hit the bed if it wants to. Sorry, not if it wants to, if that's what you tell it to do. So make sure you don't do that. Sometimes the software will help you out and give you warnings when things seem a little iffy, but not always. None of these other settings are very important, so I'm just gonna go straight to calculate. You can see this is the toolpath it calculates. It already looks pretty stinking good. So I'm going to go to Toolpaths again, and when you make a toolpath, it'll automatically bring up this preview toolpaths window, but if you want to bring it up yourself, you can go to Toolpaths, go here where it says preview toolpaths, click it, and you can hit preview, select a toolpath, and it'll do whatever one you have currently highlighted, and it'll cut the toolpath for you in this like virtual piece of wood. It looks great. So now there's another step, which is, how am I going to get this? I mean, you don't just want a square piece of wood with the logo in it. I mean, if you do, you can leave right here and you're done. But for a lot of people, you actually want the piece out of the material, and you don't want to cut this yourself, because that'd be, I mean, why would you do that if you're using this machine, right? So what you're going to do to do that part is go to 2D view up here, and I have this pink vector highlighted. I'm going to right click on it and say ungroup objects. And now it actually ungroups, here I'm going to click off to unhighlight them. It's going to group each of the connecting vectors into its own little piece. So this whole line is completely connected throughout this part of the words, so that's one vector. This whole circle is connected throughout this whole word, one vector, and the whole F is one vector, oh minus this little loop. That's one vector. This is one vector around the forward oval. There's another vector right here. That's the entire outline, and that's what we're going to focus on right here. This is the vector we're going to use to actually cut on the outside of to make our piece pop out of the wood and be done. So you're going to highlight that vector by clicking on it. Make sure none of the other ones are highlighted, because if you hold down shift, you can highlight multiple. Whoops. If you hold down shift, you can highlight multiple at a time. So we just want the outer one. I'm going to go to Toolpaths. Let me get a preview. I'm going to go to Profile now. And for this, I would suggest using the 1/4 inch end mill. But you can use other bits if you want. All these settings will be different on the machine in the wood shop because I've already adjusted it to kind of safer parameters. And also depends on the hardness of your wood. So you may need to do some research and see how hard the wood is that you're going to be cutting, and see maybe some appropriate cutting speeds for this for CNCs. And I would suggest looking into that if you are kind of deviating from normal woods and using more hardwoods. You can edit the passes. Since we're only doing a 3.375 inch cut, 4 passes is pretty good because that's a little less than 0.1 inches per pass, which is pretty low. That's less than half the bit size, so that's fine. This will choose you like where you want to go on the vector, so you can choose to cut on the inside of the vector or the outside. We want to do the outside because we don't want to get rid of any of this material right here. There's some settings here that aren't that important. Use separate last pass. You can add tabs so that the piece doesn't just drop out when you're done. I wouldn't suggest doing that. I would just suggest watching your piece as it's doing the profile cut. Once it gets near the end on the last pass, kind of stop it before it finishes and then pop the rest out just by punching it or pulling it or ripping it out. Or else if you let it cut the whole thing, the bit's going to run into the piece in some areas you probably don't want it to once it completely falls out. Now we're done with that, we just hit calculate, and now you can see it's going to cut this outline of the actual piece itself. And so if I go preview selected toolpath, you'll see it cut exactly that, and it looks fantastic. Look at that. You essentially have a completely done piece in less than 20 minutes of actually being in the software. It's going to take a while to cut in real life, but I mean, just for time being in the software, that's pretty amazing. All right, so good luck everyone on doing your image to your bitmap trace cuts on the CNC Shark, and in the next tutorial I'll go over how to make a model in Fusion 360, import that and cut that in a very similar way. All right.